Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Harry, Symeou time. Arsenal. Come on, you Gunners. Arsenal. Chronicles of a Gooner.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner with me, Harry Symeou. Happy Friday to you all. Christmas is just around the corner. For the kids, it's the last day at school. For a lot of you, it'll probably be the beginning of your Christmas break. Wishing you all a good one. We'll speak again, of course, before Christmas, but I don't know. Today feels like I'm kind of drawing a line under a few bits and pieces that I've got going on ahead of the Christmas sort of week. So it feels like one of those chilled out, almost kind of half celebratory days, I suppose. Welcome back to the show. Good to see lots of you with us. I've not long got back from the Sober Realty Training Centre. That's what they call it these days. Arsenal's training ground, London Colney, as I still call it, where we've heard from Mikel Arteta ahead of the trip to Everton on Saturday. Now, as always, we'll be doing our match day pod. That'll be out with you guys bright and early tomorrow morning, in which we'll discuss the 11 that I'd like to see. We'll discuss some of the combinations that I'd quite like to see utilized in this game. I'll talk a little bit about why I think those combinations are the right fit for this particular fixture. We talked a lot about the horses for courses thing. And I really, really do feel like it's important that we nail that as Arsenal going into what remains of the season, because yes, we've got more options than we've had in previous years. Yes, particularly at the top end of the pitch, it feels like we're starting to get players back and the availability is better. But now the kind of art, I think, that Mikel Arteta has to master is who plays with who and where and when. And I think that's really, really important. I think if we can nail that, and we're not going to nail it every single time, but the fact that we've got the bench to be able to change things obviously puts us in a position where we can rectify. So in-game management is obviously very, very important too. But I think getting it right from the beginning more often than not is going to be really key if Arsenal are going to go on and have the season that we're hoping they will. So yeah, we'll start with some of the injury news. What we're going to do on today's show, we're going to talk about the injury updates that Mikel Arteta provided to us just a couple of hours ago. We're then going to have a little look at some of the problems that Everton are facing going into this game as well, because they haven't exactly got a clean bill of health. It's worth highlighting that. And then we're going to reflect on 6 years of Mikel Arteta, because he's been at the club now for 6 years. It's flown by, I would say. Let me rephrase that. Maybe it's not flown by, but sometimes you look at things and you go, wow, has it been 6 years? And I think there's going to be varying assessments of how Mikel Arteta's fared in this 6 years. There'll be a lot of people that acknowledge that the club is in a much better place than it was. I think for me, that's undeniable. But I still think there'll be some out there that say, well, in that 6 years, we might have achieved a little bit more in terms of silverware and tangible success. But what we're going to do is we're going to explore that idea and those theories a little bit later on in the pod. So make sure you stick with us. Right, let's start off with the press conference today. What did Mikel Arteta have to say? There was a few interesting lines about his kind of 6 years in charge, etc., which we'll cover off. Maybe we won't. I'm not really sure that side of today's press conference was as interesting as the injury updates, right? Which is what everybody wants to know about, because we're in a place where, we're worried every weekend, aren't we, about who's going to be fit, who's not, and especially at the back at the moment where we are struggling. So Mikel Arteta was first asked about Ben White. He was, of course, forced off with a hamstring injury in our 2-1 win over Wolves last weekend. Squeaky bum win, wasn't it? Mikel says, yes, he's out. He's evolving well. It's not a major injury, but it will keep him out for a few games, I think. Ben is a really fast healer as well, so there's hope that we're going to have him in the next few games. Okay, so we read reports that Ben White was going to be out for a month at the absolute minimum just a few days ago. What Mikel has said does not necessarily contradict those reports. I know that there was a lot of people following today's press conference who jumped online as soon as that line came out and said, what? So he's not going to be out for a month. A few games, that could be a month, okay? And we know that Arsenal have been, Arteta has been in particular, very, very vague deliberately when it comes to the fitness of certain players. So what I would say to this is we all hope that it's not a major injury, as he says. We all hope that it's just a handful of games, and we hope that we'll have him back available as soon as possible. But I wouldn't look at this and say, Ben White's going to make it in the next 2 weeks. I would just hold your horses on that. We heard that William Saliba was days away for about 4 or 5 games, right? So just be mindful of that when you hear these updates. Another defender that we're hoping to have back in the coming weeks is, of course, Gabriel. This is what Mikel had to say on the Brazilian's fitness. He said he's pushing hard, as he always does every time he's out, and he's evolving really well. He's doing pitch sessions, so he's not too far. We have to see in the next stages of that rehab how he progresses, but we are quite positive about it. So, look, Gabriel was always going to try and move heaven and earth to ensure that he's back as soon as possible so that he can help us in the real kind of business end of the season. And I'm confident that at least by the end of the year, I'm not going to say we're going to have him back for the 1st of January, but I feel like, it won't be too long into the new year before we see Gabriel back. But again, no real clarity around when exactly the hope is that he'll be back, as well as hoping to see Ben and Big Gabby back. Mikel also had a positive update on Kai Havertz. He said he's progressing really well and quite fast in the last few weeks. So yeah, we're really positive that if everything continues like that in the next sessions, he's going to be with us soon. Now, I then asked Mikel Arteta if he could give us not necessarily a specific date, but I said, do you know, is there a particular game in your mind for Kai's return that you kind of earmarked? And he didn't give much away. He said, I don't want to say, because I think in the last part, especially after such a long time, after the rehab, I think we need to be cautious. We need to go really firmly with every step that we take along the way to make sure that when he's back and he's back for the long term. So Mikel Arteta was never going to give me a clear answer there. I hoped that I might catch him with his guard down. He was in a smiley mood. It was Christmas. I hoped that we might get an indication. Maybe he'd say something like weeks. Maybe he'd say the days line. But then obviously there was that report, I think it was from Isan Khan the other day, that said he was going to be back sort of mid-January. That was kind of the aim. I don't know, man. Reading this or listening to this as I did today in person, I get the feeling that maybe Kai's a little bit further along. And I think that story from Isan Khan, if I'm not mistaken, I think was referring to the setback that he had a little while ago that we heard about from Julian Nagelsmann that Mikel Arteta then went on to confirm. It wasn't a new thing, right? And I think a lot of people took that story as if it was highlighting a new problem, a new issue that the player was dealing with. I don't think that's the case. So fingers crossed we get him back sooner rather than later, because I think we could do with another centre-forward option, given the conversations we've been having this week. But anyway, he was also asked, of course, about Martin Zubimendi. He was absent from the section of training that the media were allowed into on Tuesday, I believe it was. Was it Tuesday? I think it was Tuesday. He was absent from that. And he said, there was a lot of management it was load management for a few players who've played a lot of minutes lately. So that's probably the reason why. In the small windows that we have, we make sure that we look after him, and he understands that every possibility and that for every possibility and every chance, you have to look after yourself. You have to take it in this league. The demands are going to be really, really high, but I think he's coping really, really well with the league, with all the new challenges that the league brings. It's a new club, a new country, and I think he's been exceptional. So Mikel Arteta, full of praise there for Martin Zubimendi. So that's the latest in terms of the fitness of these guys, but we still don't know when Gabriel will be back. We still don't know when Ben White will be back. We still don't know when Kai Havertz will be back, and we still don't know when Martin Zubimendi will be back. So I think there's enough there to feel quite confident in the fact that most of those players are going to be available to us sooner rather than later. But I don't know about you guys. I learnt my lesson with the William Saliba thing. We turned up at Chelsea. Nobody had a clue that he wasn't fit to play. Nobody had a clue that he wasn't ready to go. He got off the bus in his tracksuit. We all thought he was playing. Out comes the team sheet, hour and 15 minutes before kickoff. Bang, no William Saliba in it. We hear it's a slight knock. Matter of days, and then he goes on to miss, a number of games. And I know we were playing games every 2-3 days, but yeah, it was one where we maybe were sort of, I don't want to say deliberately led on, but because maybe it was the case. Maybe it was the case that initially they thought it'd be a few days, but it didn't turn out to be that. And I felt like there was a lack of clarity coming out of the club for us as fans, and that meant that people's imaginations run wild as they do. You look at the next game, he's not in it. You look at the next one, he's not in that either. If you set a target for 2-3 weeks down the line and then he comes back sooner, everybody's happy and it gives you a massive boost. You can do it that way, but it felt like we were just non-committal to anything with regards to how long he's going to be out. And it was a stressful time. Let's say that. Right. Let's have a quick look through the chat and see what you guys are saying this morning. One of the other questions, or the other question that I asked Mikel, and the reason I asked this question was because everything else that I wanted to ask had already been asked by the time it came around to me. But I asked him about the thought process when picking his attackers for any given game, because I've talked just at the top of this pod about how I want to go into some of the combinations and how I think that's really, really important. And we keep talking about the horses for courses idea, picking the right team for the right game. You don't want to keep reinventing the wheel, but there are certain places. For example, if you're playing a team that's going to come onto you and there's loads of spacing behind them and you're primarily going to be attacking on the break, Gabriel Martinelli's a good fit because of the outlet that he gives you, the pace, the relentless running power that he gives you. If you're playing against a low block, I would argue Leandro Trossard is the much better and more effective option. So that's kind of just an example of what I'm saying when I talk about the whole horses for courses mentality. I asked him that, and he said sort of the only headaches he's had is people not being available, and that he doesn't have a headache when it comes to picking the right options for the right game, which I thought was a bit of a cop-out, if I'm being honest. But there you go. Anyway, let's see what you guys are saying in the chat. So Jid says, saw the question you asked Arteta about squad selection. I think he'll have his preferred 11 with not too much room for change, despite the size of the squad. The other day, you were talking about how you were not concerned about Eze not being as effective in the position he's been deployed because you claim there will be some games for him on the left, for example, and some that would not suit him there, and that will factor in the rotation. I would disagree with that because managers want starters who will suit 90% of their opponents. The comments about Eze, in my opinion, described a squad player instead of a case for rotation. For stability's sake, I do not see Arteta switching up certain positions based on opponents. I don't see him playing Gyökeres this week, Marino the next. How long is this comment? Havertz against Villa and Gabriel against low blocks. He will likely stick to preferred players. Okay, so basically what you're saying is that, it isn't going to be horses for courses. That's not the way he's going to approach it. Well, let me tell you this, okay? And I look, I don't even disagree with you when you say that Mikel's probably got his team in mind, his preferred team, probably wants to stick with that as much as possible. I've always said that this season he kind of needs to, I think he needs to sort of change his outlook on rotation, because we have the players to do it now. Now, there are levels to rotation, and we've also discussed this before. You can't go and make 6 or 7 changes every single game and expect for consistency in performance, continuity, etc., etc. But you also need to recognize when it's right to rotate, how much rotation you can get away with against certain opponents and in certain games. And if thinking about the opposition and their style and what's better suited then connects to your rotational plans as well, then that's the perfect balance, I think. I feel like you do it a lot, but I feel like you're taking my comments on Eze too literally, and you're trying to suggest that I'm painting the player in a different light to the light that he should be sort of painted in. And that's not true. I just think that with Eze, and not to harp on about what we've been talking around earlier this week, is that with Eze, the talent is there. I can see the talent is there. And so I'm confident that even on the left-hand side, in the right game, he can be effective. Whereas with Victor Gyökeres, I'm still a little bit unsure about how we can do more to kind of get more out of him, because I don't personally feel, and I said that right at the start of the week, that we're getting enough out of him on an individual level and on an individual basis. But anyway, let's take a few more of your thoughts before we continue through. Jack says, can't lie, this Mikel news has put me in a good mood on injuries. Yeah, it sounds positive, but no one's actually back yet, are they? That's the only thing I'd say. What else have we got? Guna Oz says, not to be blunt, but is this interview more transparent or is it the usual? Well, look, I've said this before. Like, Mikel Arteta has no obligation to give fans the latest team news, because, like, obviously he's going to do what he feels is best for the club. And if he feels like giving too much away enables the opposition to prepare in a more effective manner, then he's not going to give it away. And there'll be some fans out there that disagree with that. They'll say, we're sort of spending our money, we're paying our money, we deserve to know what's going on. And I think there's a fine line between being transparent and giving people the level of information they want. And remember, when I was growing up, this wasn't an issue, by the way. I don't ever remember going into football matches thinking about so many different aspects of the game, so many different players' availability. You know, it was all so hush-hush. And as a result of that, you knew that that was the way it was. And you never really, I don't think, went searching for this depth of information going into every single game. And so it was easier to appease the fans in those days. I think the social media age, the fact that you've got lots of different types of media now, lots of different content out there in different formats, which is amazing in a lot of ways. But I think it's changed the relationship between football clubs and the supporters. And supporters know probably more than they've ever known now. But in that comes an expectation that you're going to be, you know, completely in the know going into every single game. And I still think there's something to be gained from just keeping things in-house, keeping things internal. And the injury stuff is a classic example of that. Why would you want David Moyes to know how you're going to approach the game or to have a better idea of what your intentions are? You wouldn't, would you? And you wouldn't mind as the manager if you keep a few fans guessing, as long as it benefits the team overall. Because if you win the game, guess what? Nobody's going to revisit it and say, we won at Everton. We put 4 past them, but I'm really upset because Mikel didn't tell me that Kai Havertz was back, and actually he was, and I was taken by surprise. Good surprises are good, is what I would say on that. Thomas says Arteta is contractually obligated to do these presses. He's made it an art to say almost nothing. I avoid watching them. And that's fair. A lot of the time, we get people dancing around questions. That's across the board in football media. Mikel Arteta is not the first, and he won't be the last. A lot of them do it, okay? They are contractually obliged to give the press conference. They're not contractually obliged to let out all the club secrets and bring you in-depth updates on players' fitness and availability. So, yeah, that's where we're at. What else have we got? John Bamford says, disingenuous nonsense, Harry. The club didn't hide the truth from the fans in the past. This is what Arteta does. Of course they did. Of course they did. Every football club in the world keeps things from the fans. Do you remember not that long ago, before KSE took full control of the club, we were literally standing in our tens of thousands outside Emirates Stadium calling for more transparency, calling for more understanding and connection with the ownership, because we didn't know what the hell was going on at our football club that had just signed up to join this Super League before the pressure meant that they, along with a number of others, withdrew. We were demanding transparency not that long ago. And people have short memories. We're going to talk about Mikel Arteta, 6 years in charge. But people have very, very short memories. Arteta's not the only manager in the history of the game that doesn't want to tell people who's fit and who's not, that doesn't want to give concrete return dates on injured players. This is something that happens across the board. And if you think that it doesn't, then you need to start taking in more football, is what I'd say. Does Mikel do it more than others? Probably. And that's fair. You know, that's fair. But to say, to make the statement of, the club didn't hide the truth from the fans in the past, That's completely wrong. And to suggest that only Arteta is tight-lipped in these types of situations when half the football world is doing it. I mean, what do you want him to do? Turn into Harry Redknapp, pull up outside the training ground in his Range Rover, wind down the window and tell whoever's standing there with a camera phone all his secrets? Come on, man. Anyway, and Dave B, I think, looks at this in a nice way. He says, I agree, H. I don't need to know the team sheet in the press conference. I'll have no bearing on it anyway, so it doesn't matter. I don't really watch them either. You don't have to watch them if you don't want to watch them. I think they're interesting in terms of, and I've said this in recent weeks, reading between the lines and trying to extract little bits of information and trying to put the puzzle together. But you're never going to get concrete stuff in there. And people will say that's wrong, and that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion, but that's just the way of the world. And I don't understand the outrage that some people seem to have around it. Thomas says, Sir Chips used to say, thank you for your interest in our affairs. There you go. That's all you need. Right, look, short pause, and when we come back, we'll bring you some updates around Everton, this weekend's opponents, and we'll reflect on 6 years of Mikel Arteta. We'll do that next. Don't go anywhere.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. That is absolutely right. If you haven't done so already, please do leave a like on the video. It really, really does help. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel as well if you're not already. We'd love to have you as a part of our family. And if you want to go one further, you can become a Chronicles of a Gooner Patreon. Visit patreon.com/the Chronicles of a Gooner. The link is in the description below, and you can take advantage of our special Christmas offer. You get 50% off of your first month's membership. The next bit of Patreon content will be with you guys on Sunday as we reflect on what's hopefully a victory up at I was going to say Goodison Park, the Hill Dickinson Stadium. I still can't get my head around saying that. But yeah, if you want to get access to that bonus content, if you want to support the show, if you want to be a member of our Discord server and get access to all our main pods completely ad-free, that's the way to do it. Patreon.com/the Chronicles of a Gooner. The discount code is Xmas25. It is detailed in the description below, so copy and paste it from there and sign up now. Thank you so much. Okay, let's do the latest from Everton then, shall we? I had a little look around online this morning because I'd heard a few people say, Everton have got a few issues, a few problems. This player isn't available, that player's not available. And what I wanted was a bit of a sort of overview of Everton's situation. It's not just injuries that are causing David Moyes a few headaches this week. It is the AFCON as well. Some players have gone off to join up with their respective national sides. So this is the team news from an Everton perspective. Iliman Ndiaye, Idrissa Gana Gueye, and Kiernan Dewsbury Hall will all be missing. Of course, Iliman Ndiaye and Idrissa Gana Gueye have gone off to AFCON, and Dewsbury Hall picked up a hamstring injury at Stamford Bridge last time out. Jack Grealish also felt something in his hamstring and was taken off 5 minutes before the end of the game as a precaution. So he's not definitely ruled out, but that doesn't sound good. Along with James Garner, he's got a problem as well. He is one yellow card away from suspension anyway. Branthwaite, Roll, and Coleman are all expected to miss out. Njai's absence should create space in the side for Tyler Dibbling, a player that I really highly rate, actually. And Charlie Alcaraz, Tim Irabunam will probably be the ones that come in for Dewsbury Hall and Garner, respectively. So just to run through what is an Everton predicted lineup from Toffee Web, which is one of the really good Everton fan media sites. They say Jordan Pickford in goal. Their backline is O'Brien, Keane, Tarkowski, and Mikolenko. They've got Garner in the midfield with Irabunam, with Dibbling, Alcaraz, Grealish, and Tierno Barry up front. So they think that Jack Grealish could well play, which is interesting. Right. That's what the situation looks like from a Everton perspective. I think our squad is going to be as you were. All those players we've talked about, I don't think there's going to be any changes. I think Zubimendi will be fine, so he'll be available. I don't expect to see Gabriel. I don't expect to see Kai Havertz, and I don't expect to see Ben White. Mikel Arteta, 6 years in charge of Arsenal Football Club. How would I reflect on Mikel's first 6 years in charge? I think when you zoom out and you look at the bigger picture, it's impossible to deny that he's done a good job. Arsenal are in a much better place than they were when he took over. There's been a lot of cultural change, and there's been a lot of raising of the standards. Have we got over the line and brought home as much major silverware as people would have liked? No, we haven't. Are we all feeling a little bit anxious about what this season's going to hold because we finished runners-up 3 times on the trot? Yeah, absolutely. And do I agree with every decision that Mikel Arteta has made along the way? Do I think he's been perfect? No, but I don't think anybody would be perfect. And I don't think anybody is going to have the unanimous buy-in of every fan on the planet with each and every single decision that they make. There's a lot of people that don't feel that Mikel Arteta will ever get us over the line. You see those opinions online quite a lot. You see it come up in discussion. You see it in forums. Sometimes you even see it in the stands. And that's fine. You know, if that's people's opinion, that is absolutely fine. But I'm not at the point where I'm ready to say that this isn't going to work under Mikel. I think there's far more evidence to say that we are ever closer than there is evidence to suggest that we've somehow got further away. In fact, we haven't got further away, have we? Look at where we are versus when he took over. And I think this is a bit like, I don't want to make that comparison because whenever you make a comparison to Tottenham, when you're talking to an audience of Arsenal fans, it doesn't go down really well. But do you remember when Pochettino was in charge of Tottenham? That for me was the best iteration of Tottenham that I can remember in my lifetime. But because he didn't win silverware, there were a lot of people that sort of rubbished what he'd done and rubbished the progress that the club had made under his sort of management. And there will be people out there that will say Ange Postecoglou is a more successful Tottenham manager than Maurizio Pochettino. Why? Because Ange Postecoglou brought home a pot and Maurizio Pochettino didn't. But the truth is that they're worlds apart in terms of A, as coaches, and B, what they managed to do in terms of raising the bar and then maintaining that level for a number of years. And I think, yes, until you get over the line, there's always going to be that question mark around you, and there's always going to be that discussion. But I really do think that bigger picture, it's impossible to deny that he's done a good job. Now, would I give him another 6 years without winning major silverware? The answer is no, because we're in a place now as a football club where we're ready to compete with the very best. But now we got to win. And I think that things change, objectives change, expectations change, squads change, managers change. And there was quite a few interesting bits about Mikel Arteta's management in today's press conference, which you can, of course, check out. I think I'm in a place where I'm expecting this year. I'm in a place where I believe that it's our time. I'm in a place where, if it isn't our time and we end up falling short, I'm going to ask a lot of questions and I'm going to be disappointed and I'm going to be frustrated, because I think the higher the expectation, the bigger the fall when you fall flat on your face. And I'm ready for that. But that's the jeopardy that is created when you're in a position where you're competing. So I suppose, to summarize, I think it's impossible to deny that he's taken the club forward. I think it's impossible to deny that the club is in a completely different state to the one in which he picked it up. But it's not just him that's made the difference. The ownership have put their money where their mouth is, which is something that at one point we weren't sure if they would ever do. They've done some good business in the transfer market, some not so good business at times as well, but that's the way football works. But I just think when you look at the fact that Arsenal right now are expected to go on and become Premier League champions this year, that we fancy ourselves in Europe's premier competition, that we're sitting top of that competition and feeling really comfortable at the moment. When you factor all of that stuff in, I just think it's impossible to deny that we've taken major steps forward. The last step is often the hardest step, and I hope that we're going to get there, and I hope that we're going to achieve it. And if we do, then all of the last few years and what we've been through, the journey, it would have been worth it. But my one issue with some of the analysis around Mikel Arteta's reign and tenure at Arsenal so far is this. I don't have a problem with people disagreeing with certain decisions he's made. I don't have a problem with people coming away from certain games and saying, I think the manager got it wrong that day. Where I have an issue is when people say 6 years. Yes, he's been at the club for 6 years, but the expectation has changed. If you say you're really upset with the way that last season went because we probably should have won it and didn't, I'd say fine. If you say the year before where it went to the final day, we should have won it and we didn't, again, I can live with that. But what I struggle with is that people completely forget that the first 2, maybe even 3 years of Mikel Arteta's tenure were about building foundations and were about stabilizing the football club and putting it on the right track and on the right path. And the idea that when people want to criticize him, they go, well, it's 6 years, without applying that context, that's what's frustrating for me. That's what's frustrating for me, because people thought that we were just going to go from A to B just like that. And the truth is that the club was so broken. The squad was broken. The culture was broken. So much was broken. It needed to be repaired. It needed to be fixed before we could go back out there and challenge and compete and take that next step forward. And I think him, along with a lot of other really good people at the football club, have been able to, first of all, put the club on the right path and now progress down that path. But they haven't got over the final hurdle. So I understand there are questions, and I understand that people are waiting anxiously to see what's going to happen this season in particular. But when people say 6 years, yes, 6 years is how long he's been in charge, but he's not really had the squad or the capacity to compete for the entirety of his tenure. And I think that's really, really important when you hear things being thrown around like 6 years without winning a major trophy, or 6 years just one FA Cup, a COVID FA Cup. That's what people say. I think that the context is really, really important. I think if you've got frustrations about the last 3 years or the last 2 years, I get that. I do. And I've got frustrations about that too. But I think you can almost, a bit like you can break Arsene Wenger's reign into 2 periods, right? Where it was, pre the Invincibles, really successful. After the Invincibles, not so successful. Few FA Cups along the way, which is obviously great and more successful than Mikel's been. Yes, of course. But there was differences, weren't there, in terms of pre-2004 and after it. And that was because of the context. The context pre-2004 was Arsenal are competing. They've built a fantastic squad. They're going to go toe-to-toe with anyone and everyone, and they're going to fight for the biggest things. And after that, it was about, now we're moving to a stadium, the financial implications that had. Then it was about surviving as a Champions League club while we raised the money to pay off the stadium. So Wenger would probably split his tenure into 2. And I'm not comparing Arteta to Wenger before people jump down my throat. You can't do that. Arsene Wenger's been incredibly successful for Arsenal. Mikel Arteta hasn't even achieved a fraction of that yet. But my point simply is this. The first part of Mikel's tenure was about stabilization and building. This part of his tenure now, and I would argue this goes back 2 years at the absolute minimum, is about winning. Thus far, we haven't done that, but I think it's close. I really, really do. Okay, I'm going to love you all and leave you all. I'm going to go and pick up my little boy from school. They're finishing school early today because of the Christmas holidays. And then I'm going to spend a bit of time with the family, and we will, of course, get back on the pod tomorrow morning to talk about the Everton game, and we will reflect on how that goes on Sunday's edition of the show. Looking forward to that. I will see you all very, very soon. Until the next episode, have a wonderful day up the Arsenal. Let me know your thoughts on Mikel Arteta's reign so far in the comments section below. I'd love to hear from you. All the best. Goodbye.
Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe. Chronicles of a Gooner. Symeou time. Come on, you gunners.